So I'm going to give you a little brief 2-minute history from where I started back in 2003, right around there. Many of you knew John Foster. Well, I love John Foster, except one meeting. So here's where I was brand new to trustees, and I was given a 10-year budget, our 10-year budget of where we were and where we were as of that day, that night. 10 years prior, we had $2 million in our trustees, in our portfolio. And I looked over the past 10 years, right up to that date, and we were at just a little over $1 million. And I asked, my first question was, based on this, we've used $100,000 a year out of our endowment for the past 10 years. Based on the current status, in 10 years, we will be out of business. You could have heard a pin drop. The next monthly meeting, John Foster, unbeknownst to me, had encircled the troops at trustees, and he made a motion to make me chairman. He said, I nominate Peter Hauger as chairman. And I said, wait a second, and there was a second, all in favor, aye, and then the rest is sort of history. I did that and for a few years, but one of the things that I wanted, that I put a caveat into it all by saying, only if Brian Kenny would be our treasurer. And Brian became our treasurer, and we worked hard, but the people in the congregation did their job with not only donations, but through their pledges. We grew at that time, our congregation, so it was, we were meeting our needs, and we try, Don and Pam, Don will go over the budget, so I'm not going to get into what he's going to say about it, but I can tell you this, it was a scary time back then. This year was as scary. Now, things have changed because we received an endowment back in 2015 from Lois Day for about $2 million. In our endowment, we break it down in two ways. We have stocks that we invest in, mutual fund stocks, and that's about 70% of our fund. And then we have 30% of our fund, which is in bonds. So the bonds are low yielding, but they're solid, they're steady. So they're guaranteed interest each year. Based on our portfolio this year, we lost, by June or July of this year, $750,000. Now, what I'm going to show you now is where we were in 2015 or 16, and where we are today. So, and also, people will look at our portfolio and they'll say, well, what are these different categories that we have? What are these different sectors that we're in? When you see these sectors, what I've done is taken very popular companies that you would know, not all of them, but the most popular ones that you would give you an understanding as to what that particular sector is. So, Robin, so I hope you can see this, but
I can see a certain area.
yeah. For instance, good, yeah. For instance, in communication, we're divested in our stocks in all of these different, and that's the value that we have, and further over is the percentage, but just move it back to the left a little bit for us, Rob. All right, so in communications, we're invested in AT&T, Facebook, Netflix, Disney. Consumer discretionary, Starbucks, Nike, Home Depot. Consumer staples, Colgate, Nestle's, Procter & Gamble. In energy, Chevron, Exxon. And in healthcare, CVS, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer. Industrials, Honeywell, Raytheon, UPS, informational technology, Cisco, Microsoft, Intel. And materials you probably don't know, but BHP and Ecolab Inc. In real estate, we're invested a small amount of real estate, and it's invested in American Tower, and you can look that company up if you'd like. Utilities, Exelon, NextEra Energy. That is the 100% of the classifications. Now so now you can see that's the value as of 1/21/21. 2.615523. That is our portfolio in stock as of 1/21. And on the other side is the actual percentage of our portfolio. So you can see, like in real estate, we're only in 2% of our entire portfolio do we invest in real estate, okay? Rob, the next slide. As of 1/19/2016, 5 years ago, the closing value, and that's deposits, interest, and withdrawals, we are at a little over $2 million. From that time to today, we have withdrawn approximately $750,000 for repairs to this building. Think about what we have done. Replaced every furnace here, the roof, 2 of the stained glass windows, every exterior door. And some of these, particularly the doors, we asked for donations. So in many of these things, like the doors, were virtually paid for. The pew cushions. These are all things that we have, beyond our weekly monetary monies that we give weekly. You also donated all these other different things. But the vast majority of that money came out of our portfolio. So back then we had, I wasn't chairman this whole time. We had, come on, Jason Valley, Kirk Marshall, Robin Gallagher, and myself have been the chairman and chairwomen for the past 20 years. But that's where we were 5 years ago. That's our total. So that's our stock and our bonds, $2 million. At the end of 2019, we wound up the opening value at $3,200,000. We closed, and again, after all of these expenses, that's operating expenses for this church also, okay? We wound up at $3.475 million. Next, Rob. As of December 31st this year, we're at $3.72 million. That is after we lost $700,000 this summer. We've come back. And the final slide shows you where we were effective Friday, the 19th, I'm sorry, whatever the day of the 19th was. 3.763, I think we're at 3.774 right now as of Friday. So from a strictly financial condition of the church, we're the strongest financially that we've ever been. The caveat to that is we have to withdraw funds, and we withdraw more funds annually now than we are putting in. We know that we're averaging well better than 7%. Our financial advisor from UBS, the United Bank of Switzerland, Ted Webster, meets with us quarterly, and he's going to meet with us either in February next month or in March, I think March. And at that time, we're going to invite the entire congregation to come in on a Zoom meeting if they'd like to see that trustees meeting. You might rather have a root canal than come to our trustees meeting, but you're more than welcome to come. We think it's important that we invite everybody to just see how we are at that time, by the way. So, our portfolio is going to fluctuate based on the economy. That's why we're 70% vested in stock and 30% vested in bonds. So I hope I tried to give you a pretty good feel as to where we are. Don will explain the budget, but do you have any questions? Anybody have any questions concerning this? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and Don will take over and go over the budget with us.
Thank you, Peter. All right, so I can expand, that helps, and then I can walk through it,
Okay.
scroll through it.
I'll start by saying my name is Don Hicks. I hope you've had a chance to read the little narrative that I put into the portfolio, into the treasurer's report and the annual report of the church. I'd like to add a little bit to what Peter had talked about. I don't look at our portfolio as having lost in March. We just had a decrease in the value. We didn't actually, money did not go out, it just decreased value. I'd also like to talk about the fact that I mentioned in my narrative of the treasurer's report that we are taking, or we did take this year, about 5%, or we were planning to take 5%, but because we borrowed some money from the PPP, which we'll have to pay back, or get forgiven, and that's what we're hoping for, and we're working on that part of it, we only had to draw 4.2% from the portfolio. And that is where we probably should be. And the trustees, as we look at the portfolio over the years, what we're going to do is to take what I call a 13-quarter rolling average, which means we look back for the 13 prior quarters, and we're going to have those quarters end in November of each year. That'll give us time to analyze the portfolio and come up with an appropriate number. The generally accepted is that if a organization that has a portfolio can draw between 4% and 4.5%, that portfolio can go on in perpetuity. Because over the years, there has been an average good return somewhere between 6 and 9% on average over a long period of time. And if you figure maybe a couple of percent for inflation, as long as you're taking less than 5%, your portfolio is going to continue to grow. So that we'll have funds to draw in perpetuity. Now getting to the budget itself. As Peter indicated, we spent some time with the trustees and committees to come up with the budget. So I'll ask right off, if you've had a chance to review the budget, which I think the reason you're here is you have had a chance to review it. If you have any top-of-the-line questions, rather than go through it right now one by one. Any top-of-the-line questions? Okay. Where do we want to start? Why don't we start at the beginning? Here it is. Pledges. One of the questions, of course, is the actual pledges as given added up to about 96,000. Why would we put in 107,000? Well, over the years, we know that some people have given more. We may get a few new members of the church that will begin pledging. And I can also say that already this year to date, we've already got a substantial increase than what we were expecting because of a couple of pledges that came in early. Moving down, the change from last year to this year, unfortunately, was the fact that we were not meeting. So the people who might give a little extra for Easter and Christmas, etc., just did not happen. We did add a few accounts in the whole expenses for COVID expenses. But in total, the fundraising, we didn't have a fair, and due to the church having to close, we lost some rental income from some people that were using the facility. I guess.
I understand it's not that clear out there, so I can try to go to another, the same file, but
Okay.
let me back up a little bit, and then I think I can expand a little better. So,
All right.
bear with me for just a second.
While we're talking about the portfolio, Pam Keogh, as you know, is the daughter of Bob Keogh, who was treasurer of the church for many years. And Pam has access to some of his old files. And we're going back on what we now call the agency fund. Our total portfolio is made up of two funds. One we call the agency fund, which was the old endowment fund that the church had for many years, and is the one that Peter was referring to that began to drop over the years. We have the day fund, which is the addition of the funds from Louise Day. So those two funds combined are about $3.7 million. The agency fund has been growing because part of the portion of the agency fund is what is called restricted. So Pam is carefully going through the old documents to arrive at what is actually restricted and what are the restrictions. Part of the restrictions could be this money can only be used for Christian education. This portion can only be used for contributions to the worthy poor. That's in the portfolio. So what we're trying to determine is exactly what portions of that portfolio are for those purposes. We are, as a church, spending money for those purposes. So what we feel is we can begin to draw some more funds from the agency account and preserve a little bit more in what we call the day fund. So Pam is working on that, and hopefully she'll have that completed, and we'll get a review by the trustees and move ahead and say, okay, beginning some point, we'll begin drawing a little more from that fund. Are we set?
Which I think so. I mean, I can't get it any clearer.
Can't get any bigger. Well, anybody who's following it at home hopefully will have the budget in front of them. Moving down on the expense side is obviously the major portion of our expenses are the compensation for our pastor, associate pastor, our secretary, and also our technology people. The adjustments in the pastor's salary this year was changes in the insurance for his benefit on life insurance, not life insurance, but health insurance. Moving on up, that was the reason for the increase in the premium of the health insurance. So moving on up, okay. Can you move up? Okay. I know it takes. Move on, unless there's questions on compensation, I think we can move right up to the operating expenses of the church. Yeah.
It's not, that's weird, it's not, hold on a second.
One of the additional points that I made in my narrative of the report was that we've changed over from what is called Quicken, which is more of a personal type accounting system, to QuickBooks, which is online, and that gives the ability of not only myself but for Pam to look at it independently in our own homes as well as here at the church. All right, that's good. The facilities expenses, the operating of the church pretty much follows what we have to pay all the time. We've budgeted a couple of not a new item, but we didn't expend some money last year, but we know it's going to be expended this year. Kind of in the utility, in this maintenance and supplies. Down here, can you stop right there? The program expense, these are changes in, we have a worship multimedia. This was a recommendation by Pastor Derek, to combine a few accounts, and we have worship multimedia, which ongoing will give us the ability to live stream, hopefully, our church services. Christian education combined. This is where we will hopefully draw some money from the agency fund to fund some of that. The growth committee and the diaconate funds are there, pretty much the same as before, prior years. Moving up onto missions, that's been a pretty stable budget over the years. We have an ad hoc program expense, which was the dialogue sessions. We're not planning anything this year, but we did expend funds last year. And pastor has a discretionary expense, things that may come up that are outside the budget, but are under the direction of the pastor. The rest of the items, obviously insurance, and we added a few things for the COVID business, and that's right there. We feel that that's probably be enough for sanitizing stuff. But we did have a little bit more cleaning occasionally, so that'll may show up as well. Another item that we have is we're getting some contributions through PayPal, and although it's great to get any contribution, and as the expression goes, 97% of a contribution is better than 0%, but it costs about, on average, 3% to receive a contribution through PayPal. Getting down to the bottom line, the final, right, stop right there, that's good. After all expenses, we had to draw 160, losing the top Excuse that, I've got it right here, don't move, don't move. I always... The actual draw during 19 through 2020 was actually 145,000 from the endowment fund, even though we had budgeted to draw 176. And as I said, that was obviously due to the loan that we received for the payroll protection. If that's forgiven, we'll be in very good shape. The major expense this year that was included is the upgrade of the electrical system, which was about $42,000, as well as a payment towards the steeple, and we have a portion of that steeple payment to be made subject to the final inspection. So the net was a loss of $38,000, but look at that as after make a major capital improvement. So overall, I feel very comfortable, and as well as the trustees in recommending this budget be approved at our annual meeting. Okay. Any more questions? Well, thank you, and we'll hope for the best.
And just for your own edification, Don, I forgot to mention it, Don just brought it up, thank you. It was the electrical system that you see right outside here, that we had to wait for National Grid 5 years to get that here. Dan Piper's been, making calls to them all the time. You can imagine how many calls he made. He was more frustrated than any one of us. But the reason I bring this up is the $40,000 expense that came for the electrical did not include the labor that Dan contributed to this church. So that's a big, big number.
Right.
So just so everybody's aware of that.
I'll just make a comment on the electrical business. After we had that all installed, we got a bill from National Grid. It was like 5 times what we usually pay on a monthly basis. So I got on the phone, tried to call National Grid, and if you've ever tried to call a utility company, you know what the issues are. Well, finally, and I talked to Dan about it, and Dan Piper said, well, we've got the problem seems to be that they've got the wrong multiplier. So I tried to talk to somebody at there, and I said, take a look at the multiplier. And I got some lady that I call the Wicked Witch from the West, and she said, you got a good rate, that's a good rate, that's a good rate. So I finally gave up. But the bill was usually about a couple $100. We got a bill for like $3,000. So I kept working on it, and then finally I got a credit. So I said, well, we don't, send me a check then for the, they agreed. So send me a check for $3,000 because we had already paid that. Well, what happens? They send me the check for the full amount of the credit. I figured, well, we'll let them have the money for the rest of the year and we won't have to pay a bill. Well, they sent me the check for the whole amount. I know that Deb remembers getting that check in and processing it. So dealing with the electric company is certainly interesting. But thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, Peter and Don.
Thank you all for coming.
Everybody.
For staying.